Good evening. I'm Stacy Reese, and I represent EndOp. Thank you for allowing us to make comment. Thank you for allowing us to be before the board this evening. We've listened to a lot of comments this evening and throughout this whole entire process, and the community has real concerns. And what I would like to do today and this evening is present our response to those real concerns. And also, I assure you that EndOp hears your real concerns, and EndOp does not want anybody to be adversely impacted by the project. I can assure you that, as I will explain further. Can everybody hear me? There's been a concern that there's insufficient scientific information. Not only does the district have sufficient scientific information, but the district has been provided the results of an unprecedented hydrological study paid for by EndOp and requested by the district. May I approach the board, please? I've provided the board with several items, the first of which is a binder that includes the complete hydrogeological study conducted by EndOp's hydrogeologist, the Thornhill Group. And at this point, I'd like to point out and introduce a representative from the Thornhill Group, Mike Keister, who is here this evening. The complete report includes all of the evidence and exhibits that support the data and conclusions in the report. Also in that binder is EndOp's proof of the mailing and publication notices that it sent to all of the landowners and well owners, including the publisher's affidavit and an affidavit from someone from our office who did the mailings. And I want the board to acknowledge that they've received that information from us this evening.
I acknowledge that we received it.
May we have copies of that?
What I have provided additionally is a copy of the board, with a copy of the report, the body of the report, highlighted with certain areas that I'd like to discuss tonight. And I've also provided the board with a PowerPoint presentation that illustrates some of the conclusions in the report. I have provided the general manager with additional copies of the body of the report that we're going to go over this evening, and the general manager is free to pass that out to the audience if they so desire to have a copy. I'd like to start with...
Time's up.
Conduct yourself in a proper manner. You will be escorted out of the building. I will not tolerate that under any circumstances.
Thank you. If the board could look at page 1 of the report, I'd like to just go over a summary of what the report was intended to do and its objectives. Based on numerous discussions in cooperation with Lost Pines Groundwater District, EndOp determined to conduct the most comprehensive drilling and testing program carried out to date for deep and untapped parts of the Simsboro Aquifer. For these drilling and testing programs, EndOp spent approximately $3 million to conduct exploration, to perform state-of-the-art geophysical logging and sidewall coring, to complete 1 large capacity production well and 2 observation wells that it used to carry out production, testing and sampling, and to monitor the water levels using automated probes and data recorders. The board could turn to page 2. There are 3 objectives of this report in the study that was conducted. The first one was to obtain reasonable estimates as to the potential effects and impacts on the Simsboro. The second was to assess the accuracy and potential variations from actual conditions of the models and perimeters of the GAMs. And the third was to address groundwater availability issues in the Simsboro. So what does the report conclude? Well, let's flip to the back, page 18 or 17 of the report, and let's go over some of the key conclusions that the Thornhill Group made after conducting this study. EndOp has conducted the most comprehensive drilling and testing program to date in deep areas of the Simsboro aquifer that had not been tapped and has developed the best and most useful information available for these areas. EndOp completed and monitored water levels in deep parts of the aquifer where information did not previously exist. At the time we filed the applications in 2007, the nearest other known Simsboro wells were approximately 3 miles away up dip. EndOp conducted production testing, including a long-term pumping test, utilizing a large production well, producing approximately 2,000 gallons per minute for 23 days. This is real data. This is not a swag, to use the term that was used this evening. If the board could turn to page 18, there are 2 other additional conclusions that I'd like to go over with you. Aquifer test analysis indicates that the GAM overestimates the impacts of some aquifer hydraulic properties and boundaries. Specifically, the GAM represents the local faults as significant barriers to groundwater flow. And overall, the results from the investigation suggest the GAMS overstates the impact. The Simsboro aquifer is prolific, according to the Thornhill's report, and based on groundwater conditions, EndOp can produce from its proposed wells 14 well sites, a long-term, reliable, drought-resistant, and excellent quality water supplies of 56,000 acre-feet for more than 50 years, with the aquifer remaining essentially full. With proper well siting, completion, and development, the Simsboro will be able to provide water to wells for many years in the future, far beyond the 50-year planning period. The modeling indicates that after pumping 50 MGDs from the EndOp well field for 50 years, the average artesian head will remain over 400 feet in the EndOp well field. And I'd like to ask the board to look at the PowerPoint presentation now, which illustrates this, how prolific the aquifer is. You could turn to the 4th to the last page in the packet. You'll see a chart that looks like this. We do have some extra copies in the PowerPoint presentation as well for anyone in the audience who wants to view it. We're talking about this chart right here. Mr. Cooper has them up here at his table. Copies obviously for everyone, but if you could share with your neighbor, that would be appreciated. So according to the Thornhill report, there is plenty of water in the Simsboro. This chart illustrates that point by showing you that the baseline storage volume, according to the model, in the Simsboro, just within the Lost Pines jurisdiction, says that there's 46.5 million acre feet in the Simsboro within Lost Pines. Each of these little water towers represents 1 million acre feet. So we've got 46.5 million acre feet. If you account for the DFC pumping after 60 years, we've got 45.8 million acre feet. The number actually says 45, but we believe it to be 45.8. If you account for the storage volume with the DFCs and EndOp's pumping after 60 years in its proposed plan, the aquifer will still have 44.4 million acre feet available. And the storage decline after 60 years of EndOp pumping will be 1.4 million acre feet. As illustrated in this, the lightened water towers show the actual depreciation or drawdown within the 46.5 million acre feet that's in storage. This information and the conclusions in the Thornhill report actually are consistent with the district's own hydrologist conclusions. Specifically, the district's hydrologist concludes that the impacts are less than what the models show, and that the faults are less pronounced than what the GAMs show. So we're not disagreeing on the science here. Our hydrologists and your hydrologists agree with the same results, as well as 4-Star and LCRA's hydrologists. We all have the consistent information, and our conclusions are consistent. The general manager recommends that EndOp's permits be granted, and that recommendation is supported by Chapter 36, the district's rules, and the science that we've provided to the board. Another comment that we have heard this evening is that water marketers haven't played by the rules. EndOp has options to lease or owns groundwater rights on approximately 14,000 acres. And EndOp has been working with this district every step of the way since it filed its applications in July of 2007. EndOp conducted this study at the district's request. It spent millions of dollars to drill test wells and monitoring wells to conduct the study. This demonstrates EndOp's good faith in doing the project if the science proves it and supports it, which it does. EndOp provided the districts with the results, and to this date, this is the only study of its kind conducted in the Simsboro that is this comprehensive. The information gained from the test and monitoring wells has been so valuable that the district decided to use EndOp's wells along with one of HOT's wells and one of 4-Star's wells as part of its monitoring system. And the district is still using those wells today to monitor the aquifer. It's impossible to get a water contract without a permit. There is no question that there is a need for this water. Once the permits are granted, the water supply agreements will follow. I heard another comment this evening and over the course of this process that exporting water will stifle economic development in Lee and Bastrop counties. Nothing will halt economic development more in Lee and Bastrop counties than the determination that there is no future water supply. Denying permits means there is a concern about a future water supply. In contrast, granting permits, particularly export and transfer permits, demonstrates the sustainability of the aquifer and instills confidence that there is a future water supply. Heard lots of comments that the resource is going to disappear if EndOp's permits and other applicants' permits are granted. This fear is completely unfounded based upon what we've seen in the Thornhill report and how many water towers will still remain after 60 years of pumping at 100%. Our unprecedented study shows the resource will not disappear, that it's prolific, and it can produce the amount EndOp seeks without adverse impacts. And keep in mind that EndOp has already spent $3 million drilling those test wells and monitoring wells. And if those permits are granted, it will spend millions more drilling those wells. And EndOp would not invest such capital if the resource was going to disappear. Bryan and College Station, both relatively large municipalities, have been using the Simsboro as its public water supply with no adverse impacts for over 40 years and and have no plans to stop using it. The last comment that I want to address is the comment that we've heard consistently, repeatedly from all of the landowners in the community which is, my well is going to dry up. First, some landowners' wells are not even in the same formation. For example, some of their wells are in the Calvert Bluff or Carrizo formation. And because the Simsboro is not connected in a meaningful way to the Calvert Bluff or the Carrizo formations, there would be no impact on those wells. To the extent that the wells are in the Simsboro, the location of EndOp's wells have been selected to minimize impact. Some of the original locations of the wells that were originally included on the applications have been modified over time as this report was done and concluded. So EndOp has selected specifically the deepest portion of the aquifer and then selected locations within the deepest portion to minimize the impact on existing wells. It would be unfair to compare the impact of Alcoa's wells to EndOp's project, given the location and the depth of Alcoa's wells. They don't compare to the location and the depth that EndOp's proposed wells would be. The main reason why, if the wells are in the Simsboro, that landowners' wells will not dry up is because EndOp wants to institute a monitoring and mitigation program. In other words, EndOp is not only willing to let the district monitor its wells that it will be drilling, but EndOp is willing to put probes in other landowners' wells to collect baseline data to verify what a particular well is doing before EndOp starts drilling. And once EndOp drills, it will continue to monitor those wells to see if there's an adverse impact. If there is an adverse impact, EndOp will take measures at its own cost to lessen the impact. And I brought with me an example of a transducer, or I'm told by our hydrologist that it's called a transducer. And this is an example of a probe that we would be putting in the landowner's wells. And if you attach a rope to it and you drop it all the way down into the well as far as it needs to go, and it stays there. And the inside of this probe has the ability to collect the information about what is happening inside your well, if your water levels are decreasing. And we're willing to put these in your wells and have the district monitor those for you and collect the data. And we can analyze the data and determine if you actually are having an impact. And if so, EndOp is willing to lessen that impact at its own cost. EndOp would like to work with the district to develop a monitoring and mitigation program that will have rules and procedures that the district approves of. In conclusion, I'd like to address Aqua's request for a contested case hearing. You received Aqua's request for a contested case hearing, and we recognize under Chapter 36 in the district's rules that a party with a justiciable interest has standing and a right to protest EndOp's applications. We don't find it necessary to expend the time and money exploring whether EndOp has this justiciable interest or standing to file its protest. We concede that Aqua does. We are prepared to participate in a contested case hearing and welcome the opportunity to show Aqua, the community, and the board that EndOp's project will not cause unreasonable harm. This concludes our presentation, unless the board has any questions.
I have a question.
There's, no, I can't take man. I'm sorry. No.
What about the population in the next 50 or 60 years? What about the population growth? What does that do to the statistics that we're being
I thank the board for the
presented
time and
with?
attention this evening.
I believe Ken has a question. We were told we would get a PowerPoint presentation. This is
Well, I
not,
didn't have that copy.
no, I don't think this is the report from the firm, but not, we have a copy of the PowerPoint
They're
presentation.
not available here tonight. We have a copy that we're gonna take, and y'all will call us, want one, and please share those, go make some copies.
Put it on the web? Put it on the website?
We could,
Yeah,
with,
let's do that.
with y'all's permission.
Thank you for your time.
Nancy, I think we have some.
Oh, okay.
Question from board member.
The first question is, how did y'all come up with 56,000 acre feet that you're requesting?
I'm gonna, if it's okay with the board, I'd like to have our technical person who worked very closely with EndOp to select the well locations and the acreage that we're seeking, address that question. They're asking, how did we establish that we need 56,000 feet?
Can we hear the question?
question for the public, please?
How did EndOp come up with 56,000 acre feet they requested?
Thank you.
The way that they came up with that number is,
How?
yeah, how they came up with that number, that's, without a representative from EndOp here, I can give you the analysis of what the 56,000, the potential impact that 56,000 may have. We did not help them determine what number or what type of interests they may be looking for as far as coming up with the number.
I will say that I know EndOp has conducted market studies and understands the need and demand for water in the counties in which they've requested, or listed on their applications. If that's helpful.
Information y'all furnished on the potential need in Williamson and Travis County, you know, they do not match up to that until 2060, needing 56,000 acre feet.
Right, and one thing that we would do is a projected scaling of the production. As the demand increases, then the production would increase to correlate with the demand. Our buyers wouldn't necessarily need the full volume initially, but will want to have ramp-up time.
It showed that y'all only had 100 acre feet that y'all were doing to Williamson County water.
Sure.
In here.
We can't hear the question back here.
Go.
It showed that y'all only had 100 acre feet that y'all were providing to Williamson County water. And then they had the option to pass through the rest of the 56,000 acre feet. Can you comment on that?
Sure. That's the minimum that the WCIDs anticipate needing, with the ability as development grows to pass that through to other users. And as I commented earlier this evening, it's impossible to get a buyer without permits. So we are confident that there is a demand, and that when the permits are granted, that the water supply agreements for full amounts for the identified users will follow.
So y'all have no certified area of any of your prospective buyers that you're going to use?
The question is, where are the areas in which our prospective buyers are? They're in,
Do you have any certified service areas of any of your providers?
Talking CCN?
Right. In other words, that you have a certified area that you are
not
obligated?
at this time.
Okay. Have you seen the, one of the,
Yes.
have you seen the Houston toad habitat map?
No, I have not taken a look at that.
Y'all have not done a study on the impact of the Houston toad to the Houston toad habitat?
Not at this time. If that's something that the board is requesting that we do, I can certainly take that request back to my client.
But it shows significant drawdown from all the permits.
Do you want to comment on the toads, Russ? I think Russ has a comment about the toads. He's our EPA
I
expert.
asked a question about
ahead.
the drawdown, the significant drawdown from all the required permits
Are right over the Houston toad habitat. And I asked if they had done a study on the effect of the Houston toad habitat.
No formal study has been done on that for the simple reason that the Houston toad is a surface creature. And we're talking about Simsboro drawdowns that are more than 2,000 feet, or Simsboro wells that are more than 2,000 feet below the surface. So let me put it this way. Drawdowns in the Simsboro in the hydrostatic head in the well will not affect surface moisture in any way, shape, or form.
The Houston toad basically lives underground except for 1 month a year when it comes out to breed. So it lives around streams and sandy soil. The drawdowns that we're looking at, like 750 feet drawdown in the, on the Simsboro. But my concern is the other aquifers above that are going to fill in that gap. So I think it will be affecting the Houston toad habitat.
I'm going to ask Mr. Keister to comment on that.
You are correct. Those are the drawdowns that the model shows for the Simsboro aquifer itself. The Simsboro aquifer, however, is isolated from the Carrizo sands where the Houston toad lives by the Calvert Bluff, by clay layers that are in the Calvert Bluff. The water does not move vertically very well between the Carrizo, through the Calvert Bluff, and then into the Simsboro. These drawdowns that are simulated from the model, they are specific to the Simsboro aquifer and do not reflect what's happening in the Carrizo.
I understand that my concern is the pressure is going to leave that aquifer. You're saying no.
No, I'm saying yes.
You're saying yes, he's saying no.
The Simsboro, will relieve the pressure in Simsboro, but the Houston toad is Carrizo, Calvert Bluff.
My concern is when the pressure is lowered, that the other aquifers will fill that vacancy.
That's what Mr. Keister attempted just to answer.
It will not happen.
It will not, no.
Okay.
You will have enough recharge, and coming in to the Carrizo, that you will have enough recharge coming into the Carrizo. You will not see those. You will not see those declines reflected in the Carrizo aquifer.
Do y'all have the route of the pipeline that will be used to pipe the water?
We have proposed pipelines,
Take
but
the
it
mic.
depends.
They're proposed.
Let's all just stand together.
We'll be happy to stand together. The short answer is yes, we've looked at proposed pipeline routes, but those have not been constructed, obviously, haven't been developed yet. So there are alternative pipeline routes depending on where the customers need the water.
From where y'all wells are proposed, it will go right through the Houston toad habitat. Like, you cannot get it out of there. So that will affect it.
You know, I'm sure that before the engineering is done on any project, we're going to analyze all the environmental issues that are associated with that project, just as you would if you were developing a road or a bridge or any other infrastructure. You have to do those kinds of studies before you undertake that activity. That will be required to be done.
As of this time, no environmental impact studies have been done on the project.
We've studied the hydrogeologic impact, but and the environmental impact of the hydrogeology, yes. But as far as the actual construction of the pipeline, no, because that is an expensive process and won't be undertaken until there's some assurance that there'll be water produced. Because we're talking about literally hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars in studies that will and must be undertaken before the pipeline is built, but can't be undertaken in the absence of assurance that there's something to build the pipeline for.
Are y'all going to be, the Texas Water Development Board approved like $2 or $3 million for a study for a pipeline? That's going to be like $400 million. Are y'all involved in that?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think if I'm recalling correctly, that's a proposal by Guadalupe Blanco River Authority that is south of this area and does not include this project at this time. Now, to the extent that the study embraces this area, we're going to participate in it, but we have not yet been asked to participate.
And Stacy mentioned an item about that y'all are prepared to work with the landowners on their wells.
Correct.
Are y'all gonna have a budgeted item to replace the wells, or?
Yes.
Because I know, like the city of Elgin, they said it's gonna cost over $200,000 at present time to bring their be able to replace their wells.
Our client says if there is a scientific-based adverse impact, that they're going to do it. Our client has assured us that if there's a scientifically proven adverse impact, our client's going to do whatever it takes to fix that well so that it's restored to the same condition. I don't know if you have more questions, but keep firing them.
Hey, one of the gentlemen said, your well or our wells?
I think, Ken, we could wrap it up here. Is there any other questions from the board? Let's try to coordinate these microphones.
My question has to do with your groundwater study and permitting. As you know, there was a study made several years ago by the state of Texas that was done by a professor from the University of Texas named Dr. Dutton. And that study covered the Simmonsboro from north of Bryan College Station to around San Antonio. And he divided it into 3 parts. This particular area of Bastrop and Lee County was in the north end of the south portion, and we were in the south portion of the central area. So we got a double dose of study. When he finished the study, he came up with the groundwater availability model, which is nothing more than a computer program. Now, that's what we go by, simply because we have no other study. And now you come in with another study that doesn't match Dr. Dutton's study. And my problem is that with anyone who has a financial or a political interest in the results of that computer program should not have the ability to change the parameters of it. And that includes him, me, and you. And that's why I would like to see you run your study using these figures right here. The one I'm showing you is EndOp's pumpage 100% produced with no other pumping in there at all.
Can I respond?
We did run it the exact same way you're speaking of. We've spoken with Andy Donnelly, your hydrogeologist. We agree with the groundwater availability model. We didn't say that we think it's wrong or that the parameters are wrong. We understand it is a very useful tool. The one thing that we did find from the putting in the wells and doing the testing of the aquifer, the physical testing rather than just a computer program, was that things like the faults, as they're modeled in that GAN, don't restrict flow, or don't appear to restrict flow quite as much. We think that it certainly is going to be beneficial to do additional actual physical testing to confirm that. But we are more than willing and happy to work with the tools that we have available, with the GAN, the groundwater availability model that the district uses. We don't disagree with what Mr. Donnelly has presented to you. We think his numbers from the GAN are correct. And we think his conclusions about the GAN are correct.
his conclusion show a 500-foot drop?
His conclusions show that your pumping would create a 500-foot drawdown.
So you do agree with that?
That's what
You
they
have a
show.
500-foot drawdown.
Over a 60-year period, pumping 56,000 acre feet per year. I don't have it in front of me, but if that is what that particular model shows, then 60 years of pumping the full amount, 100% of the time, not wrapping up production, then that's what, then we would agree that that's what the model shows. We think that the actual figures, that it may overstate those impacts. But we also agree that additional study needs to be done. But the only way to do that additional work is to go out and pump some wells and see what the aquifer coefficients are, see how it reacts.
How many wells do you think you need to pump? How many wells do you think you need to pump to get a good test?
To get a good test or to see how it reacts over a long term, you're going to want to stress the aquifer. And however many wells that may be, we know that the Simsboro aquifer in this area is capable of producing all of the requested permits for a very long period of time. We know that based on the models, the existing models as they are, there's nearly 50 million acre feet available, and they're stored within the aquifer. Pumping for 60 years of 100,000 acre feet is not going to diminish the capacity or the ability of people to continue to produce.
Thank you.